last night, Colin and Heather were watching Grey's Anatomy in the living room, and
Oh,
I was
cool.
like having a breakdown, and I like went downstairs and came back up, and then Colin's like, "Hey," and I was like, "Hey," and then I was just like about like Grey's Anatomy. There was like a red hair girl, and I was
Mm.
like, "Who's that chick?" And then he
Oh,
was like, "Did you just say chick?" And then I was
she
like,
entered
"Yeah,
the
I've
reading
been
room.
getting in the Red Scare."
Oh my God.
I, sighswoon, hereby request Josh Ovalle for collaboration with the Internet is Dead podcast. Please, Josh, be a guest on the podcast. We miss you.
I've been
Wizard.
like looking at your stuff so much this week. I feel like you're inside my brain. I was like thinking
Okay,
about
love
this
that.
and because I like didn't like I wasn't on your like Patreon or anything. I just like have followed you for a while and like seen your posting
Mhm.
style and think it's like very cool. And I like went on your Patreon and read your book for this episode and it feels like your like art style has like seeped into me.
Okay, I love that you were saying that because I think that the Patreon and the book have a visceral transmission quality. And I
What do
think
you
the internet
mean?
has like a document quality. Like I always
Oh, I
think
get
when I
what you
think
mean.
of like
Yeah.
the way that I interpret like how people feel with the work, I'm always like, okay, if you're looking at Instagram or Twitter, it's very like I'm reading a document. And then for some reason the
Mhm.
book and the Patreon, it's like the effects are different. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like energetically.
What do you feel like the effect is like on the Patreon and the book? Because I definitely get that. Because I think just looking at something on social media is weird.
Yeah. Well, it's like I think that looking at something on social media, it's like it has a time and a place that's very concrete. It's like opening like, it's like this is a page, right? And then
Mhm.
I've noticed with Patreon and with audio, which I've observed in myself and also like doing it and also listening is like audio has such a transmission quality that like sometimes I'm almost like it's more important how I feel when I'm like doing audio than what I say. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah,
think
that's
it's
so
felt,
interesting.
Hmm.
and I also feel like the more I don't know, like the less professional sometimes I feel with the audio, the better, because then it's more like the boundary between, I don't know, connection, something. I'm on that right now though. Like I just believe that the internet got psychic like maybe 3 years ago. Telepathic, not psychic, telepathic.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
definitely feel that about recording because I feel like our best episodes are always us being just in the right vibration whenever we
Yes.
record. And I don't know. It is interesting because I was also looking at what you were talking about with flow state because I've read the book Flow, so I was like curious about it.
Mhm.
And I really do think it is just like letting your brain turn off. Um,
Yes.
and I don't know. It's like nice to just like, I don't know, see that kind of information online also through your work. Because I think it's like more of, even though it's a very spiritual piece of work and like you're putting out a lot of spiritual information, I think it's a lot of just mental health wellness for
Oh, for
people.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, like I think it's definitely it's like a self-help quality, but like access through like the energetic, like visceral process, I think, which is the only thing that helps for me because I'm not like an object-based person at all, you know? It's like,
Mhm.
so that's definitely, yeah, I agree.
Wait, what did
Yeah.
you mean by the internet getting more, would you say, telepathic?
I just think like I think it started. There's a few things that started it. I think in part was Starlink. I think I watched. So I live in a super rural part of Hawaii, like just like super rural. And only 2 years ago, the property I lived on had satellites from I think it was Spectrum, and it was like so overpriced, terrible Wi-Fi. It was always going out. It wasn't fast. It wasn't instant. And then Starlink came in, and everyone bought Starlink, and now everyone has great internet. More people are online than ever. A lot of the guys out here who never listened to podcasts, now they are. And I just think that like something happened with Starlink. Also, TikTok had a very instant effect, but things just accelerated and then everyone got online during COVID. And so it's this mixture of like everyone's online at the same time and more instant than ever, because I feel like I've
Hmm.
watched the internet go from like, okay, I post something and there's always a delay, right? There's a delay. Like somebody in like China sees it, maybe even 5 seconds later is not instant enough. And now I'm
Hmm.
like, it is instant. And the algorithms too, right? The chronological thing. I mean, a lot of people fought against that, but the reality is that moving into a model of like what you like on site, like we're going to show it to you right now, it creates like a very like visceral, like constant, like instant, like, like energetic
Hmm.
thing. also it's, you know, spiritual communities when you go into the deep stuff of people who like heal over the phone. And I've had like experiences that were just out of this world of people transmuting messages from like Michigan to LA, you know? So it's
Mm.
like there is this, I think we're reckoning with the boundaries right now that are just like in the air. And it
Mm.
sounds all like trippy right now, but I think it's actually pretty simple. It's like it's on site. Like, you know, if you have a feeling, you put it out there, someone sees it in the moment that you feel it, which is how the transmission happens, you know? So I'm
Mm.
excited about that.
Yeah.
I think things are gonna get different. I think they're gonna get fun on the
Aw.
internet.
No, yeah, I feel like we've been talking about this for a while where it feels like there's a shift happening or something. Wanted to say also about the wellness thing too, because I feel like it's very cool because just like the word wellness has so many connotations online. And I think it's really cool, like looking at your work and stuff, the way that it's framed in your work is just a really cool thing to see. And it's very inspiring and definitely helps a lot of people.
Mm.
Yeah. And wellness, I mean, there's always gonna be scammers and everything, but I think my bone to pick with wellness is that most of it puts you in a very unempowered state. Like if someone's always selling you vitamins and health stuff, you're always going to feel unhealthy. You know what I mean? They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, did you hear about
Mm.
this crazy thing that like you've never heard of and have no connotation with?" And then they get you into it for 2 months, then you realize it actually made you flare up. It's like this like fake churning out. And so I think for me, I'm just committed. I'm like, if I can do things that are invisible, like if I can help someone with nothing, like that's all I want to do
Yeah.
because I also think physical solutions are so personal too, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, it's like the thing of yeah, like if you don't have it or if someone's always trying to sell you something, it feels like you're lacking something, then there's something that you're missing that you want.
Mm.
Yeah,
But yeah.
I think there's some people like, do you guys follow any like wellness? Like, have you been in a cycle with any health influencers you feel that actually helped? Where you were like,
I
damn, you put me onto probiotics or whatever, like
Well, I feel
milk.
like I'll listen to more of like I listen to like spiritual influencers. I was gonna say I think it's funny because my pipeline was listening to like Duncan Trussell and then
Oh, that's great, yeah.
finding girls who were in it and following the
Yeah,
girls because I feel like the girls just are more like I don't know, it's just like a completely different thing. And I do think it like as you were saying, the internet has really become just like a vessel for that sort of thing, which is really cool.
yeah, I agree. Duncan Trussell, I have the same feeling where it's like, I love what he provides, but it's
Mhm.
like voice or like I can't like fully like I'm the same as you where I'm like, okay, where's like a voice that I actually like like a girl voice that I like
Yeah.
more. I also think women are up. Like I'm on that right now where I'm just like it's clear to me like it's not even me being hopeful or trying to be inspiring or something. It's like women are so up right now. Like every time I get something from a new brand, it's a woman brand and it's related to cannabis or spirituality or wellness and like and it's so you know, women are just making more money and I just think that it's our time. I think.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
Well, there it has
Philosophically,
just been
also,
like I think
men.
just like a major like mass like a more of an acceptance. Not that there's like a complete acceptance of like femininity, but I think people are really understanding how much they like need it now, especially
Absolutely.
like masculine people.
Mhm, and, like, women can have their audiences now, like you said, it's like you like Duncan Trussell and you're like, "Okay, wait, I kinda wanna find a girl." It's like the internet has given that to us, you know, and I
Hmm.
think it's so I'm also very excited for that. Like,
Yeah.
the girls are in.
Wait, I'm gonna do an intro
oh.
also because we kind of just started talking.
Oh, yeah, we started
Um,
chatting.
Back to the Internet is Dead podcast.
Hell
Today
yeah.
we're joined by Gabi Abrão, also known as sighswoon, spiritual influencer. I know that you've kind of grown up with spirituality. I listened to the one podcast we both did when we were researching. The one that you did, I forget what it was called, but you were just talking about like your background and your dad
Other
being
world,
very,
probably.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That was so good. That was honestly that podcast was so like that was such a big deal to me, like, when it happened because I
Aw.
don't know why, but I was so scared even, like, I did it and I was like, "Wait," like, it was just so important for me to get that out, I think, like, talking about
Aw.
that out loud. That was a crazy
Mm.
you know, when things happen and you're like, that was kind of like a portal, like, I hate to just
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
like, that was a
Aw.
portal moment for me where I was like, "Holy shit, like, I can actually publicly talk about this." And I was so confused by it that even after I had this whole thing where I like ate an edible and I got so paranoid and I was like the podcast is fake and they're making fun of me. I was like, because he used to be a memer, Jack Wagner, who runs
Mhm.
Otherworld. And I was like, oh my God, this is a fake podcast to make fun of people who have paranormal experiences. And I got so scared. That's how much I cared about that one. Like that's how much I
Aw.
was like,
Aw,
like a voice moment.
No, but
Yeah.
that
stop.
kind of
That would
makes
freak
sense
me out.
because he was like, prove it, kind of. You know what I mean? So I like get
Yeah,
that.
that's what I mean, like yeah, like, I was like and it was early too, like, now it's really big, but when I did it, it was kinda just starting,
Mhm.
and I just wasn't sure. I was like, "They're gonna turn me into a meme," and then it was fine, but just proves how much I cared about that, I think.
No, I think
So funny.
podcasts and speaking online is like I've
Mhm.
felt like a much scarier means in a way, not that it like and can sometimes be like a way better means, but I think that I've developed so much more anxiety around people perceiving just my words in real time than like writing something down and having the time to think about it, which I think is interesting. And I find that a lot of guests are of ours, even though we're like just two girls, I feel like are like very like scared to come on. I think
Yeah.
everyone just thinks everyone's out to get each other sometimes.
Oh, for sure, and they are all the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's,
Yeah,
like,
especially
emotional dodging
online.
attacks, like, yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Spiritual attacks.
But I did want to ask if, because I know you talked about that background with growing up with a very spiritual dad,
Yeah.
on that podcast, but just for anyone who hasn't listened to that, I'd love for you to give a background regarding spiritual practices, because I think that especially like the information you share online, I feel like can even be intimidating for someone who isn't super like hasn't been doing it their whole lives. And I think the
Yeah.
context of you having that information and being taught that since you were young is very interesting and also helps people to feel
Mhm.
like, okay, I get this. I get how this came to be.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a language. Like that's what I always say is like people when they have that like resistance to any spiritual stuff, I'm like, it's not that it's like up there. It's that it's just like a slightly different language. But it is the language I grew up in because like ever since I was a baby, it's like I lived in a world where energy was considered, metaphysics were considered, there was always this idea that there was this invisible component to everything. You know what I mean? Like a
Mm,
depressed person had an aura, like somebody who was jealous and frenetic had an aura that could affect you. And so that was always in the house. There was a lot of like cleansing and stuff. But then my dad, in a more structured sense, he was so in Brazil. There's a huge following of Spiritism, which is a sect of spiritualism, and spiritualism is from the UK. And it's kind of the way that I explain spiritualism is if somebody was just super interested in the Holy Ghost, like in the Christian Trinity, like the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, and the Holy Ghost is this idea of like the felt presence of spirit, right? It's like you have
mm,
God, you have Jesus, and then you have this kind of mystical thing that, they'll be like the Holy Ghost is in the room when everyone's singing together and in seance, right? Witchcraft will call this seance. And so they believe that if you go into a trance state, you can shift your vibration and talk to the dead, basically. And their interpretation is that you're talking to the dead, but we see now people talk to aliens and all this crazy stuff, right? So he had that, and then also witchcraft, because Brazil is very infused with witchcraft. So I would say that in the house, I had both what I consider like high ether magic, which is pertain to the spirit and your dead loved ones and God, and there's only like light there. And then there's witchcraft, which is this idea that you can kind of do these sort of tedious rituals to get results in the physical world. So I had both, right? It was like, and it all worked, honestly. Like I said in that podcast, like the earliest spell I remember doing was when you lose something and you say, they believe in Brazil that there is a leader of the spirit children, like children who died, and they like to play tricks on the living. And so you would pray to him and be like, okay, if you give me back my keys, like I'll jump 3 times and scream 3 times as like a ritual of like, I'll play with you. Like it's almost this thing about, oh, you're being a serious adult, calm down and we'll give you your stuff if you play with us. And it works every single time. And I remember the first time I did it, I was like maybe 6 or 7 or something. And I cried because I was so scared, because, you have your dad being
Oh.
like, the spirits gave it back, the ghost gave it back to you. Yeah. And it will just happen this weird way. And so that was the thing with the witchcraft, right? And then, yeah. And then spiritism is just kind of this belief in just like higher energies are always present and that our souls are really powerful. Yeah, but I always had my dad's just straight in it. Sometimes he goes too far. Like if I talk to him about spirituality, I'm just like, all right, like let's wrap it up. But I have a skeptical side that I think, like even with the spell, for example, to this this idea of this spirit in charge of the spirit kids or something. Like I also have this inclination to say, oh, well, maybe it's just sort of more of a subconscious undoing, like there's some
Mhm.
psychoanalysis in all of it. So the way that I see it is like I got all this info from someone who's just so bullish on it, and then now I want to interpret it a bit more and kind of have more like psychology and like engineering involved.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because a lot of the stuff, a lot of spiritual stuff is a simple mechanism that usually pertains to either like letting something go or charging something up, right? And so
Yeah.
so many things like including the spirit kid thing, it's like you're so frenetic and annoyed and stressed and you're looking for your keys and you're like I have to go somewhere, and then you give up that energy to something else that you don't, you're just, you like give it up.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing that they do in AA meetings. Is like the true thing that heals people is getting them to believe in some kind of higher power that they can give themselves up to. And so I just think so many of these things, they're just rituals to the same place, which is either a letting go or a focus charging up. And so I think about that a lot, but it was just always in the house. So just, yeah, my dad, I always just think I'm like carrying on my father's work. So him,
Yeah.
it's crazy. He was always on the computer and he was always talking about spirituality, and now that's me.
Mhm.
That makes
Oh,
sense.
that's a really cool, or just like a really interesting way to grow up also. Just like
Mhm.
having that. I know they talked about this a little other world too, but like just because a lot of people grow up more traditional and then come to spirituality, so then to kind of have the reverse
Yeah.
of that, or not the reverse, but to just like already grow up being in it. Um, but I am curious about what you said about like as you're kind of growing up and like exploring spirituality, interpreting it in different ways,
Mhm.
than like the way that you grew up or the way that your father interpreted it. And I'm curious like how you've been doing that or like what ways you've interpreted it that's different.
I think honestly, I think it's a collaborative, like symbiotic relationship with the internet, because I have this, setup right now where it's like if I say something and it goes over someone's head, it's like I can see the problem in that, right? Because I want the message
Mhm.
to pass through. And I know that they already know the message, but there's so many barriers to that. Like the word God, for example. It's like you say God and everyone's like, "Are you a Christian?" It's like
Mhm.
everybody's reckoning with God. There's not one person on this earth that hasn't. Maybe they have a different word for it. Maybe they didn't think it was God, right? But it's like that word is just a poem for so many things. So I'll think like, oh, if I say something and I use the word God, it's like, who does that put off and who does that help, right? Uh,
Mhm.
and like my dad's stuff, like all of it, speaking of visceral transmissions, like earlier, it's like what I gained from my dad wasn't the intellect of what he was saying, right? English is his second language. It was the visceral experience of like connecting to the meaning and being able to see it in my own way. Does that make sense? And so I'm like trying to
Yeah.
help get that through. And then it's also just enjoyable for me because it's almost like working out or something, but like in your head, like
Mhm.
trying to get it through. But yeah, yeah, clarity and visceral transmission is always the goal, I think.
Mhm. I'm curious with the internet acting as this space that has become very spiritual. I like very much agree with you. Even if it's not really even being equated to spirituality, I think that that's kind of the thing that people maybe even like about it. I mean, especially I think community to me has a lot to do with spirituality.
For
And
sure.
I think that I'm just curious what you feel about, because the internet is also this very weird place with a lot of negativity at the same time. And I think it can lead you into these traps. And I'm curious how you grapple with, I mean, working with online and also just the online space being a very sacred one at the same time as all these weird things that can happen to you and people being just like hateful and
Mhm.
all the things that can happen and on the internet that I feel like most people listening to this have an understanding of.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, also like hate has gotten crazy, like in general. Like there was a time where it was
Yes.
like, you only see a few people getting it, and now it's like, dude, anyone. If you go viral, like you're half dead. Like, like
Yeah.
half the audience is gonna try and kill you. But how I see it is like I used to, so it used to hurt. Like I think hate and stuff like that used to like hurt naturally. It was like, oh no, like, and now I just see it as something to study. Like the past couple years, I was like studying haters really hard,
Mm,
and it's kind of amazing because people hate from their profiles and you can kind of see what they're going through and like where that energy comes from. And so I kind of just see everything now as just like research. Like if somebody comes at me a certain way, I'm just like, okay, let's try and like commune with this personality and like what led them to like stoop this low kind of, and like,
mm,
yeah, because I do, yeah, and it's very, yeah, and I'm thinking on like a personal level. I also do like I've come to like the challenge of being not liked, but I used to not. That's the thing. It just took so much
Hmm.
time, I guess. I don't know. To me, honestly, at this point, I just think it's so it's so baked into the design that it almost doesn't matter anymore. Like it's been neutralized.
mm,
Like I said, like anybody and their mother, like you could be anyone. You could be like so talented, you could be so beautiful, whatever. And if you put yourself out there, it's like you're going to get the same reaction from different camps. And it ends
mm,
up just kind of equalizing. Like whenever I get like, I see a bad review on my book or something, it's like I just look at the reviews of like my favorite authors in the world who I just think can do no wrong. And I find the same one on theirs. It's like, oh, you called me
mm,
pretentious. Okay, well, you called someone called Clarice Lispector pretentious, like we're all we're all fam,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think it's a lot of neutralizing. It's a lot of centering. I mean, honestly, and that's a spiritual thing, right? But a lot of centering, you know, maybe it's like letting go. Maybe the three are either let go, you either center, or you conjure something. That's where I'm at now. But
Mm,
with centering, like that's a very like it's almost like a cliche term. But I think centering online is a very wonderful way to use the internet as a simulation for your own mental health, because throwing yourself out there in the world, it's like so much is going to happen and it's all invisible battles. You're comfortable at your home, in your home. It's not a physical attack, it's purely energetic and mental, right? And
mm,
so I believe that challenges make us stronger. And it's like, if you have that mentality going into it and you just sort of like strap in and you're like, okay, this is part of it. You just get stronger. But I think
mm.
it's a great social simulation. I think it's amazing. I think it's crazy that you can feel the embarrassment or pain that you would feel like in a crowd full of people in like a comment section. I think that's crazy.
Mm.
That's great because then you don't have to go on a stage. It's kind of, I don't know. I think there's a lot of value, but it does, yeah.
Like very recently, I've kind of shifted my perspective more than I ever have about hate and seeing it from other people because I feel like as someone who like I mean just the transition to having a podcast and not having a podcast and then being on the receiving end of like mass hate, I think really changed the way that I perceived it. And I think it's maybe something everybody should experience
Okay,
and
I think that's
learn
true. I think
from.
that's,
Yeah,
yeah.
because it like changes the way that you value, I think, what other people have to say online. Because for a while I was very like, okay, if I log on to like a certain Reddit page and I read what other fans of this thing have to say, I'm gonna take it really seriously and kind of maybe base my own opinion off of what these people say. And I've noticed more that when I'm looking at stuff like that, I'm like, ugh, these people are probably just like coming from a really weird place and I'm not even gonna like trust what they have to say. And I know that's kind of a very like basic level thing, but I think the perception of just like people's words really does change when you realize that people will actually just like tear apart anything and it kind of needs to be like this firsthand experience of it to understand that
Yeah.
fully.
It's like wild dogs, you know what I mean? They don't care if it's like a chicken or like 1,000 thread count sheets, like they're gonna chew it up. Like that's
Mm,
just how it goes. I agree with you that I think I don't know, yeah, I think everyone should go through it. I think it's necessary. I think it's helpful. I think it
builds
kind of like,
character.
yeah, builds character, range. I agree so much. It makes me never want to be a hater. Like if I
Yeah.
have to give advice to anyone, I'm like, get that shit out early. Like I think I got it out when I was like 12 on the internet. It's like
Mm,
speaking of like energy and upliftment, it's like, this is a very spiritual vibe, but like the greatest power you can have is connection and oneness. Like that's just the truth. And oneness is not achieved through seeing enemies in everyone. That's how you just make yourself smaller and have these very temporary highs. You know what I mean? Like hating is a temporary
Mm,
high. Like I tweeted this the other day where I was like, it's not that avoiding judgment and jealousy is kind. You know what I mean? It's not like we're all trying to be so nice to each other and not judge. And it's more like it's just so bad for you. Like it's the opposite energy is what gives you everything that is
mm,
good in life. And it's like it's more about you than anything. Like, but I was like, you're stabbing yourself in the leg and calling the adrenaline rush empowerment. And that's generally how I feel. But I feel bad. Like I think I feel when I get haters at this point, I feel sort of like a sympathy, where it's like, why do you think you have to do that? You know what I mean? Like, why do you think you have to do that?
mm,
Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the curiosity thing is really interesting because I've been trying to do that just more in life. I feel like where any emotion that comes up or any experience, instead of like casting it off as good or bad, to try to look at it in a more curious light. So I think that applying that then to just haters on the internet is a really interesting thing too.
mm,
Yeah, I'll say too, I mean, speaking of the curiosity, like haters, for example, like I found so many people I like from haters because I loved how they handled it. Like honestly,
Hmm.
some
mm.
of my biggest fan moments where I was like got in tune with like some influencer, I was just like, oh, she didn't apologize. Like I'm following her,
Yeah.
So it does have actually like technically good results. And I've noticed too, it's really just extreme love and extreme hate is a charged up energy no matter what. And
Mm,
like for that individual who's starting it, like maybe it's very clear to them, but what it is in the world is its own world, right? Like it might make someone love you more. It might make you love yourself more. It might give you like a download of like a weak spot you have, and then all of a sudden you solve it. There's just so many
Mhm.
ways to transmute that energy. But yeah, I've come to love it. I don't want to love it too much, but I do love it kind of.
I know that you've talked also about just protecting your energy in general, and I'm curious, like while also kind of accepting this realm of the internet and this aspect of it, do you at all try to protect your energy when you post things online? Like, do you have like a practice for that at all? I'm just curious if you do that like in terms of the online world as well.
Yeah, 100%. I don't even think it's on purpose, but I was raised so like speaking of my dad again, like so like my dad acted like we were always in a spiritual war, like everybody. Like it was always like, people want you down, like people, like people are jealous, they want to take things from like don't forget. And I think it's because he grew up in like, a weird city in Brazil and like grew up poor and like we grew up poor, whatever. And that can come out of people when they're desperate. And I think he saw it firsthand even more than I did. Um,
Mm,
and so I think that's where it came from, but it was very much like it was just so much focus on just being like never let anyone tell you who you are, like, unless it resonates, like never let anyone like put you down. Like it was very passionate. So I feel that way still with the internet and I like get off on like just not letting things get to me because I feel like so sound. But yeah, I think more than ever, spiritual protection on the internet is so important because it's just to me at this point, it's just a fact of like, an example I can ground it with maybe like seeing a celebrity crash out from hate, right? It's like that doesn't happen from the hate itself. It happens from that person internalizing and believing it to the point where the story gets like downloaded into their aura, downloaded into their spirit. And now when they look in the mirror, they see the story that they were told to feel, which might not even be true, probably isn't true at
mm,
all, actually. And when people like lose that like, you know, personal empowerment, that personal recognition, it's like anyone can turn you into an object or like a voodoo doll, you know? And it's
mm,
Hmm.
so important to just not let that happen. And that's what a lot of, when people are hating on you and lying, people lie like crazy. This is another thing that surprised me is like when I saw tabloids growing up, I was like, they could be true, like, and now I'm just like, people just lie. People just lie because if they
Yeah.
don't think it's bad to say, they'll make something up. And it just goes to show you that people aren't passionately sharing their truth and trying to like help people. You know what I mean? They're just trying to like kill you, you know? And I take it very seriously. Like I'm like, if someone gives you a new story, you know, and it's like our entire world is built on story. Our entire mental health is built on story, you know? So if someone is trying to give you a new story, trying to make you believe it, and it's one that'll make you smaller, sicker, less happy, less functional, it's like that's an attack. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like that's a witch on the side of the road. Like I'm not happy, you know? So I do, yeah, I think everyone should be really, and I think the way to do it is also to have a sense of humor. Like even just the word trolls, I'm like that works so well, you know? It's like
Mm.
there's a troll under the bridge, like you know,
Yeah.
like
Like
trying to
some
get
like
in your way, sell you something, scam you, give you poisonous apple, like, you know, that's what the internet has become, I think. And so
Mhm.
you gotta be careful and yeah.
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 Um, this is kind of not related, but you mentioned your dad again, so I just wanted to ask this kind of going back to that. And like just growing up because my like mom is also like in some ways kind of similar. I feel like not like as intensely spiritual, but she also just has like she just like has a ton of like spiritual things that like she grew up teaching me and my sister about and stuff. Um, and yeah, is just a very spiritual person and had like a bunch of like superstitions and like things that she would like do when we were kids and stuff. Like if she like I remember like I was just home recently, and we were like about to leave to go somewhere, and then she sneezed, and then she like made up like some story about why we can't leave yet because you're like not supposed to leave right after someone sneezes because it's like
Oh,
upsetting
wow.
the gods or something. Um,
No way. I love that.
but yeah, and so I was curious because I know your dad also immigrated here from Brazil, like you said.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, because my mom came here from India, and that I feel like has shaped my identity, obviously, like as I was growing up, but I feel like it's only really becoming aware to me, or I'm only becoming conscious of it, like as I get older and as I kind of grow more into myself. So I was wondering if you've had a similar experience, or if there's like ways that you've kind of seen it shape your identity, like the older you get.
First, I would say I love that you have like Indian influence in your life because they're so like the Indian culture right now, I'm like is so on top. You know what I mean? Like because everything right now is spirituality and tech, I think. I think those are the two
Yeah.
things I'm just gonna watch rise. And I'm like India started the new age movement for the West, right? India was the
Yeah.
primary inspiration. Like that was a strong energy. So it's like India like inflicted everybody with this like spiritual energy, rose in the tech world. And now I love it. I don't know. I'm
Oh,
excited.
thank you.
So that's exciting to have. But yeah, for me, I think my dad was kind of a kooky character most of my life. And then I got into witchcraft in my own way and I started to be like, oh, that's what he was on about, kind of. Like I think it
Mm.
takes like speaking of like barriers to entry and like this idea of like connecting, it's like my dad pretty much said everything that I feel like I now learned on my own. But it's like having that boundary of like, oh, it's just my dad being silly, or you know, my dad stops people in the doorway for too long and talking about this stuff. You know, it's like I had this barrier to understanding him as like a teacher, and now I realize that everything I learned he's kind of already said, just in a more like simple, you know, dad way that was easy to kind of, you know, disregard or like kind of laugh at, you know.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and I do think we inherit it. I think that the subconscious and the visceral body is very powerful, and I do think that just having that in your house regardless, it's like so baked into you, and that I think certain terms click easier than the next person because, you know, maybe it was said in a different way by your mother, but it was still like meaning wise, you know, it was still just as
Hmm.
clear as, you know. Yeah, definitely. Do you
Mhm.
feel like you have like, do you feel like you're going deeper into a spiritual practice these days? Or were you ever like, or like, was your
Yeah,
mom?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel like or I don't know, it's like very interesting because I feel like I'll just like hear things now about um like people practicing spirituality now like in the West, and I will like look at it and be like, "Oh, that's something that my mom did when I was like 7 years old," you know, but at the
Mm.
time I like didn't know that or think anything of it. Um, so it is really like interesting to go into it now from a different perspective and kind of reframe it almost.
Yeah. And I think you're ahead, probably. I think you're going to realize that you're ahead, you know,
Uh-huh.
especially because I do think like philosophy and spirituality from India, I think that is like truly like the core of what a lot is of what's we're going to see more and more of the West. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. No, it's
yoga. I
very
mean,
fascinating. Yeah.
everything is just like, upwards of like yoga and breath work and, psychedelic. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
In that vein, I mean, I feel like both of you can answer this question too. Seeing westernized spirituality online, is it weird? I mean, especially like Gabby, since you spend so much time in those spaces online, like I'm curious if it's weird seeing all these ideas being taken and kind of changed a little bit, or at least like their root isn't really acknowledged.
I personally think about Brazil and Brazilians
Mhm.
is they love to share. Like, I gotta say, like out of when there was that time with the reckoning with cultural appropriation, it was like the Brazilians weren't really saying anything. You know what I mean? They're just like,
They just
come,
want to tell you.
yeah, they're like, "Come get food, come dance with us. What like Brazilians just
Aw.
love when you do Brazilian things. So culturally, that was a bit alien to me, but I had to deal with it from other people. Like if when I would share my witchcraft stuff, I was really into witchcraft. Some of my first, honestly, my first income from my page was a PDF about spells and rituals,
Aw.
and people would come to me and be like, witchcraft is from Africa and like all, and I'm like, no, the pagans did it too. It's like everyone does witchcraft. Everyone does what I call like earth magic and high ether magic, right? Everyone. And they have a different, name for it. Even Christians are doing witchcraft and they're doing God stuff,
Mhm.
That's just something that I know as like a fact. And I always kind of felt like, even like some people consider me like contrarian and controversial. And it's like, I just think like I need to separate from anyone who thinks that way, not because it's like not because I am trying to be like contrarian and like against the cultural conversation. It's just because it's not true. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
just not
Mhm.
true. And you can't convince anyone of that who doesn't know. And I think for so long I had to like keep that off my page because I was like, there's no way that I'm actually going to talk about what I'm learning and what's happening if someone keeps interjecting and saying witchcraft is from Africa. And I'm like, it just isn't. It just isn't. And I don't want anyone to read that because it's not true, Like everyone does it. And I would even say that the nature of reality is a mixture of witchcraft and
Mhm.
energetic magic, right?
Yeah.
Um, I do believe in credit, though. I believe in, like, I don't want people to forget that yoga came from India. I don't want people to forget that Indians invented zero because they were
Mhm.
aware of the void and not because, it's like, don't let, people take it away. Like, not in this like scarce energy, like you have to hold it on, but in an honoring way. That's like, that's the culture that gave that to us. You know what I mean? Like, that
Mhm.
is awesome,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
No, I
What
definitely agree
about
with,
you?
yeah, like all of that. I feel like, yeah, the thing about witchcraft is so interesting. People commenting that because I don't know, but I feel like I'm assuming that like a lot of the people commenting that weren't even like from Africa. Like they were just like saying that from like
Yeah.
wherever, you know? So then it's like, okay, like come on, really? But it's also like, I don't know, literally witchcraft is like you said, entrenched in every single culture. And like there's so many different books from every single culture and like religion about it. Just like in different roots. So that's a really,
Mhm.
yeah, crazy thing. People online are just crazy, as we've said.
Yeah, and it's something it's what's interesting about it too. This is, I had this whole thing recently about I was like studying the new age energy so hard. Like my whole last year was just me thinking about new age, right? And you're not supposed to because everyone says, "Oh, this is the Westerners stealing from everybody else." And I'm like,
Hmm.
everything's always going to have like a consumerist quality, right? There's always people making products really fast and being like, "We made stickers,
Mhm.
we made candles, or we have a yoga class that has no, connection to India at all." Like that's always going to happen, but there's always something else happening behind the scenes as well. And the thing about the new age movement is that on a surface level, everyone's like, they get pissed off. A girl has a high ponytail and a yoga mat. Everyone gets mad. But in reality, like it was a global reckoning that was not just white people, not just Westerners, about how every religion is kind of doing the same thing. And that makes us smarter. To me, I'm like, that
Mhm.
makes humanity smarter. It makes our consciousness more potent. It also unifies people because instead of
Yeah.
saying, well, my God is, my God versus your God, it's like, that's kind of stupid, And so
Yeah.
it's kind of this global reckoning. And I also find it a bit reductionist to the rest of the world because it's like, yeah, white people have gotten a lot of land and a lot of stuff, but like speaking of India, like India is like they have so they have so much power right now. Like they're like that culture, it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people who have spiritual power and influence beyond kind of just what you see in some resort community or something. I just think it's
Yeah.
a topic, but I'm way more interested in just the evolving of what's happening on a
Mm.
global scale. And like I've been calling it like spiritual engineering, like this idea that like everyone has realized that there is a spiritual need, even though it's nonsensical to most. Like we just came out of a very atheist culture, like I would say the past 20
Mm-hmm.
years, right? Like, which had to happen because I think Christianity messed up. I think the last time we had really good spiritual engineering was Christianity, honestly. They made a system, they made an institution, and
Mm.
then they, ruined it with human influence, and it left a lot of people traumatized, and then they killed God entirely, and now it's like everyone's realizing they do need God and they do need ritual and they need to understand that that is there no matter what. And so I think we'll be a very interesting kind of time of fusing that I think will benefit everybody.
Mm.
Yeah. No, I also feel like it's kind of a chronically online thing too, because it's like if like I feel like if I like asked my mom about it or something, she'd be like so happy that everyone's
Mm.
tapping into this thing, you know? So
Totally.
that's also, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
creators of any spiritual thought, anyone who has evolved any spiritual thought, it's like they wanted it to get out there. They wanted it to hit as many people as possible because like unlike things related to, everything's going to be monetized whatever, but the intention of anything spiritual at all is to help and uplift on an invisible level. Like even yoga, like
Hmm.
okay, the point of that is to truly like engineer people's bodies and minds and their breath work and like uplift them. And I truly think that if we like found the spirit of the originator and talked to him, he'd be so happy. I really think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
he'd
and
be
I feel
like, keep
like he'd be
enjoying.
like, yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like
keep
it's all
worshiping.
also like leading to the same place or all rooted in the same thing or all just, coming to the same thing. Because I know Brittany knows this story, but I always think about this because one time, um, my mom and I were in New York and we went into one of the churches to like light a candle and say a prayer.
Mhm.
And I remember she was like very, very adamant on my sister and I like lighting a candle and saying a prayer. And like anytime we're in a church or anything, she's like if like we went to Italy and we were just like visiting the churches and she was like very adamant on us praying in there because to her it's like all gods are the same. Like they all just, want you like they want the same thing and they all serve the same purpose. And I feel like that also has affected a lot of how I feel about spirituality, where it all kind of is the same in this way, which
Mm.
obviously it's like not like everything's different, but it all has the same root, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I also think anyone who's worried, which is a fair worry to have about the commodification of spirituality or people who get to the point of greed is like, to be honest, those people always get struck down. Like,
Yeah.
like anyone, you see that with every single cult leader, even people who genuinely have gifts. Like I'm thinking of like John of God in Brazil, like truly was healing people. And it's like he let his human ego stuff get in the way. It's like anyone who does, it's like it ends for them.
Hmm.
Um, and I think people have to trust it's like in the world of of spiritual stuff, it's like there is a ceiling and like there is oddly an energy that checks people and makes sure that if you're making money it's balanced and you understand your position, that you're not above anyone. you know
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it is a really beautiful thing that it's becoming popularized in a way because in that sense then like we're just popularizing like love and
yeah.
popularizing like be like oneness and just like feeling like yourself and like all these really positive things. And I think that's like really important for people. I feel like people find spirituality and feel like so much more like themselves. I know like I had that experience with it. And yeah, I don't know. It's a really nice thing that we can just be like, yes, all these things came from these places, but we can still let everyone be a part of it
Mhm.
because it's really just life. And it is really cool like thinking about how all these different gods, there's all these just different similarities in different religions, and like that has to mean something. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think about that a lot. But I also did want to ask you about spiritual engineering because I was reading what you're writing about
Mhm.
it online.
I'm
And I was
just
curious if, wait, what'd you say?
I was like, I'm starting that right now. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like the week started.
Um, but I wasn't sure if I had the like right understanding of it, but if I did understand it correctly, I wanted to ask if you think that the internet could be another means for spiritual engineering. Like, does that make sense? Or I don't know if I was thinking about it the right
I
way,
think
really.
I think it is in the sense it's almost in a covert way because something that I was saying the other day is that the internet is constantly like forcing us to reckon with invisible space. You
Hmm.
know, like this
Mhm.
is like this computer and this, like the places that it takes you and the things that you feel and how you're constantly like traveling at lightning speed between like emotions and imagination and all these things. It's like we're constantly in a space of just like juggling air. And like that's what spirituality is, right? It's like belief and air and thinking and whatever. And so I think that it's innate. And I think that it's almost the cause. Like I would say that the internet is the reason that spiritual engineering is going to happen. And going back to this idea of like, cultural appropriation with religions, it's like the truth is all religions and their tools are technology. It's technology, it's
Hmm.
like, the Christian technology was like go to confession and come here every Sunday with your community. And that was their technology for creating a person who is spiritually sound, right? And then you go to Buddhism and it's like, well, be detached and we'll make mandalas out of sand and then throw them in the ocean to show you that like, everything, everything has a cycle and ends. And that's just technology. And I think at this point, everything is about tech, including spirituality. And what does tech do? It says, okay, let's look at all of these technologies that were below this and then do better. How do we go from Bluetooth to Wi-Fi? How do we go from a computer that's this big to one that's this
Mhm.
big? And I think
Hmm.
spirituality is going to be the same. Yeah, it's just like what is the best use, you know, use
Hmm.
and
Do you
yeah.
have any thoughts on what we're evolving towards? I know you mentioned that you think there's just going to be like a greater spiritual awareness, but I'm curious if
Mhm.
you have like a more detailed thought on it.
I think okay, there'll definitely be a more spiritual awareness and kind of a lot of what we do will be beyond the physical and the dimension that we seek and that we feel won't be in physical space anymore. And I was thinking about this when I was staying in downtown LA at this like friend's apartment, and it was like pretty high up. And I was like, all the old buildings were focusing on creating dimension in the space, right? It was like, how do we like sculpt like dimension into the stone? Like, how do we make a room look big? And everything
Hmm.
that's new now is very flat, right? It's all steel and glass. And it really just kind of works as just a blank space for everything that's happening in the invisible, right? Like on the
Mhm.
computer, in the phone. When you look for dimension, it's in a video game, it's in a movie, it's in a conversation, it's in a conversation where you can talk to 10 people at once now. Like dimension, like I think that humans are naturally dimension seeking. I think that's just like that's how we evolve. We're dimension seeking and we like to just replicate, And so the direction that I think we're going is like the dimension is very in the invisible, in the technological and digital in the digital. Um, and I think that's what it's about. And anything that's like, I think it's going to be a really good season for sculpture. I think sculpture is going to get really big again because 3D printers have evolved past just their little like here's a little
Hmm.
plastic army man. Like it's gone crazy. And I think we'll kind of see this polarization, which is, you know, the very dimensional arts are still going to exist, but in this kind of like niche, almost like bourgeois way. You know what I mean? Like that's still always going to be there, but we won't be seeing it everywhere, But I do think there's going to be
Hmm.
this like polarization of taste, and the mainstream is very much going to be on like the phones and everything, and there's going to be this like rapid, accelerated market all the time, and then everything that kind of we grew up this like slow media is just going to be kind of a fun extra thing, like someone using a film camera.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and a lot of the stuff that we grew up with that we thought would be forever, like literacy might kind of become more of a kind of private niche hobbyist, you know?
That's
It's
so
wild.
interesting. That's
Mm.
crazy. No, I saw a tweet like earlier today being like, you talk to someone under 12 because like they're just all not literate right now.
Yeah. And I will say, like, in this town, even a lot of people aren't literate, but they all listen to podcasts and they
That's so
all,
interesting.
I think I saw something really interesting where my boyfriend's a construction worker and he works with a bunch of construction guys. And when I would talk to them like 3 years ago, they could not really hold conversations that well. Like they were just like chill dudes and like they're really smart at like other things, like one's a pro
Mm-hmm.
surfer, one's like, like they have great skills in more tangible ways. But when it comes to being kind of like literate and intellectual and whatever, and then they couldn't. And then they started listening to like Huberman and Joe Rogan. And all of a sudden they can hold conversations about politics and stuff simply because they could listen passively and then just improve their kind of vocabulary and conversation skills by watching two other people talk. And so I think, I don't know, like I understand the fear that people have about, intellectualism and literacy. And it could just be me being so positive, but I just
Mm.
think that we're evolving in a direction where the written word might feel primitive. You know what I mean? Like where we might be
Mm-hmm.
getting to a point where it's like, we're beyond symbol, we're beyond, because if you think about
Mm.
it, like imagine if when the press came out, someone was like, oh, like nobody knows how to carve into stone anymore. We don't think about
Yeah.
like I can't carve letters in a stone. Like I don't have an ancient printing press. Like I really wonder. And another thing I think about a lot too is I'm like, what was the purpose of literature? It was the only way to get thought and ideas and stories around the world. That was its primary intention. And I think the intention of something is the way to look at what's going to happen to it. And it's like, it became so big because it was the only way. Like, it was only like a few years ago that you can talk internationally on the phone for free. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's like with
Mm.
WhatsApp, maybe, or Skype, like 10 years ago. So if
Yeah.
you wanted to get a whole message from somebody in like Italy, it had to be a book. It had to be a book that was mailed and distributed through an institution, the Bible, right? And it's like that was like that story got around because it was in a book. And now it's like you can do that instantly anywhere. You can get thought and ideas anywhere, whether it's from a podcast, someone's Twitter feed, whatever. And I'm just like, like this, the computer is something that evolved from the typewriter. It's like this is our press now. Not only is it a press, but it's attached to a magical page that constantly changes. So I always
Mm.
like
Yeah.
to think, I'm like, what is actually happening beyond kind of the fear of, you know, things that we used to value and think were what kept society together. Like, what if they're just not?
Mm.
Yeah. No, I really like that way of looking at it through like the intention instead of like the tool that's being used to get the intention out.
Yeah.
Mm.
I feel like that's very helpful.
So, I don't know if people are just saying this, but people are like, everyone around me who's involved in institutions like publishing, um, are saying like they're all going out of business. Like they said that 50% of colleges in the next 10 years are going to be bankrupt.
That's
Yeah, that's
crazy.
crazy.
And I was like, I
Yeah.
want to, when you're growing up, you think that institutions are just there, right? You think that I
Yeah.
never
Mm.
thought of them as businesses. I didn't know the IRS was a business. I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
Well,
So
it is
yeah.
That's
interesting, like observing it that way. And even just what you said about the guys like listening to podcasts and becoming more social. It's such an interesting way because you can observe it in so many little things. And I feel like that's something I've been kind of studying through just like my peers' like sense of humor, where I'm like, oh, like, because I was on the internet when I was really young. And so I feel like it warped me and I like had this disconnect from people. And now it feels like everyone's caught up to me in a way in like the least
Yes.
pretentious way possible because I like don't think I'm like better or anything, but I just think it's interesting. Like it does create this big gap, especially among people who are the same age. And I think it's just very interesting seeing it in everything and it's leaking into everything, especially just like what you just described about like colleges going out of business. Like it's just like becoming this really physical thing.
Yeah, and it's wild. It's crazy that we're watching it. And I truly think like for me, and what I'm always like saying is like I think it's neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's just what's happening and we should be so grateful that we're here for like such a crazy shift in the timeline.
yeah.
Yeah.
You
That's what
know
I
what
was
I
gonna
mean?
say, because it's like those like institutions have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So to be alive at this moment, like witnessing all of it is a really crazy thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think it's also weird for kids who grew up just as it like became a thing because I feel like people almost didn't believe us, you know, because we were like, oh my God, this thing. And
Yeah.
now we're like, yeah, so this just like completely changed everyone's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say too, like, there is a negative side to it, which I believe that if you're conscious of it, you're going to be one of those people that naturally continues to seek knowledge and stay literate because that's still going to be like, I think what could happen is it could become just more polarized where it becomes like an upper class thing and kind
Hmm.
of, like we're
Mhm.
almost going back to that because things happen in a cycle more than they happen linear. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that it's going to go, oh, wow, but then everyone has a chance. It's like both because my whole thing is I'm like, I didn't go to college. I couldn't afford it. My parents couldn't afford it. But I went
Mhm.
so hard on like learning about what I wanted to learn about. And that's something that now everybody can do because of the internet.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if someone doesn't have that will, they're going to fall into this other group where it's like illiterate people who just are exploited in labor jobs. You know what I mean? And so I
Mhm.
think it's like there's so much kind of weight on the individual, maybe, it's like you can't really rely on the systems anymore, but at the same time, the systems used to, hoard everything. So it's kind of both, right? It's like it's kind of on
Yeah.
you,
Mhm.
but you have more of an opportunity than ever to like be who you want to be and
Mhm.
No,
go
that's
after
Yeah.
what I was thinking. Yeah, when you were talking about it originally with like people being literate and like it being an upper or like just the upper class and stuff, like I was just
Mhm.
thinking about how everything in life is just a cycle and we're just like repeating things over and over again and everything that's happened has already happened, but just in a different form.
Yeah,
With different
100%.
objects in our hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And even the
Mm.
aesthetics of things, I do think people are sort of romanticizing like monarchy and this idea of like this like upper class revival. And it's like it's fun to look at. And it's like I think everyone needs to know that you have a choice where you end up. And it's a spiritual
Mhm.
power and it's an intellectual power, but it is kind of on you, like
Mhm.
it's on you. Um,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I saw like because I know the old money aesthetic is very big right now
I
on
know.
like TikTok and stuff.
Totally. And even the and beyond the kids, it's even the people who are coming into power, you know what I mean? They're really into
Yeah.
this idea of like
Mhm.
bringing back the like, powerful US superpower. And it's very like the aesthetics are very clear where they want to go with that. Um, and but then but it's just so interesting. Like everything's a paradox because in one sense they're bringing that back, but in the other way, you know, men are more illiterate than ever, and like women are,
Yeah.
so I was like, this is my theory. This is my theory that that is just like probably just what I hope happens. But I have this idea of like women actually unifying after what I feel like the past decade was a very spotty, slogan oriented beginning. But I
Mhm.
do think that like what we've seen in past cultures of like the men being on top and like gathering in the bathhouse and being these sort of philosopher types, I'm like, that's happening to women right now. And like men are sort of
Mhm.
falling into the category of being like laborers and programmers. And like
Hmm.
maybe, it's my dream is that like women get together and then the kind of the poles shift where it's like now women have
Mhm.
the money and they have like a someone in the house taking care of shit that's stronger.
Yeah. I
Dude,
do know
we
that Pluto's in Aquarius for the first
Oh,
time. And like,
so yeah, so
Yeah,
that's gonna yeah.
I think it
100%.
will. That's gonna change everything.
That's gonna
That's
flip
how
the
I feel.
switch.
It
Well,
honestly, I feel like it makes
Yeah, it
sense.
is insane.
wait, Aquarius is air, right? That's the whole thing. We went from Earth
I,
to air, right?
I
Let me
think
double
so.
check that up.
But I think it
Aquarius
was
is
like the
water.
last time it was in
Yeah,
Aquarius was during like the French
it's air.
Revolution. It was the brink of the Industrial Revolution and all that stuff. And so
Mm.
to like have it happen now with everything that's happening, um,
Mm,
yeah, it just feels like a very like there's going to be a huge change in the way that systems and structures work.
Oh,
yeah.
100%. I also would say, I mean, if we want to get all like astrology-ish, like like Aquarius is the air sign, right? And I think previously we were in Capricorn, which is like the most earthy sign in the world. And it's so like
Hmm.
structure based. And it was like, and Capricorn almost like holds on to structure too much, right? Like it's the
Yeah.
earth that's like, even the people I know, I think it's like, it's very like, like obsessed with results, right? And I
Yeah.
think that that has a ceiling. And what's interesting about going into Aquarius, it's like now everything's about space travel. It's about the internet, which is information traveling through the air. And I will say women are airbenders. You know what I mean? Like we,
Hmm.
if anything that we're good at, it's like we don't read, maybe we're not as good as what's in front of us physically, like every woman is different, but in terms of just this general idea of where we excel, it's like women are great visionaries. You know what I mean? We're great like philosophers. We're great like thinkers and like community, and I just think we need to heighten that and just like work together. But it is a very airy medium to be, like a perceptive woman is an airy medium. And I think it's our
Yeah.
we have to build our castles in the sky,
Dude, we need our turn. Like we need our turn for like being in charge. And then we
I
can like go
know.
back to equality. Like just like a little bit. Like just let us
Yeah.
have this.
And I think we will. I really think that it's already happening. Like I have this theory that I'm obsessed with, maybe even more than spiritual engineering now, and I'm calling it the bathhouse. And I just have this idea that like women need to like female empowerment isn't about being fake, right? Isn't about like fakely loving everybody and being like we're all kumbaya. It's literally about being unbothered. It's like, okay, that woman
Yeah.
wants to get an abortion, great. I don't want one. That woman wants to have 10 kids, great. I don't want one. That's great though. Everyone's great, because when you're in the bathhouse and when you're in the sauna with a bunch of women, there's nothing, you don't have any of your tools, you don't have your makeup on, you don't, if like someone got plastic surgery, you can see the scars. It's like there's this idea of like when you're in a sauna with a bunch of women, it's like, there's no competition, there's no fighting, we're all together sweating. And I just have this idea of like almost like the, it's like the this image of sort of like lounging in the bathhouse and it's timeless and we don't care about age and we don't care about competing and we don't, we're just all together, like,
Aw.
and I think that's possible.
Hmm. No,
But
I
women
love
need to
that so
do
much.
Yeah, that's really sweet. As you said that, I like saw the picture in my head
No,
and I
yeah.
saw like if I was good at art, then I like saw myself like drawing it, if I was like able to like draw all of that. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
very sweet.
it's like poetically, I think it's the truth because I don't think women need to get together and like gung ho organize and battle each other and fight. I think we need to be like relaxed and open and like honestly, speaking of spiritualities becoming centered again is like being in a state of oneness together,
Mm,
Hmm.
Like I just think, I don't get that from this chat at all, but I meet a lot of women who are like very fussy, right? Speaking of haters, it's like if you don't like someone, oh, it's this big deal. And it's like, just let it go.
mm,
You know what I mean? She's on your
yeah.
team. Even if you don't like her, even if you guys have drama, she's still on your team, You
Mm,
know how much drama men get into at high stakes fucking, the high stakes levels, and we never hear about it because they're just not as fussy about it, you know?
mm,
There's just so much for us, and I just think that I do think women are up, and I do think that the future of the leisure class is women. I think we're going to see a lot of wealthier women with is the roles are switching where younger men with less money want to be with women with money, you know what I mean? And they're free. I really
Yeah.
think that's happening. And I think it's a great thing. I think women no longer have to rely on men as this worry for the household. I think of Emily Ratajkowski, how she had a baby, the man cheated on her, and then she moved in with her best friend who also had a kid and they like raised the kid together. Like
Yeah.
there's just so many beautiful routes for women. We all know cat ladies that are happy as can be. Like, like women really need to see how great they are and not in this
mm,
like feminist slogan way, but in this like true deep, like look around. You know what I mean? Like
mm,
Hmm.
every day I see a cool old lady with crazy hair and big glasses who's just like is like, at Whole Foods, like living her
Yeah.
life.
yeah.
Like we've done well for ourselves. Like, and I
Mm,
just think I'm like women are liberated and it's time to like build on that foundation and you
mm.
know.
Talked about this actually in another episode because I thought it was such a cool concept, the idea of online tethers and stuff. And a
Yeah.
line that like really stuck with me that reminded me of what you're talking about is just the idea of like if someone can have something, seeing it as, oh, they're like proof I can have this. And instead of
Yeah.
like, because jealousy is such a crazy emotion. And we were
Mhm.
like also talking about that in the episode as well, because I just thought that entire post was so good for people to read. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, no, that reminds me a lot of what you were just saying.
Yeah, and speaking like, you can I think this all kind of connects like the future of women winning and spirituality and the jealousy thing is that the reality of all of that, if you think about, what I've learned from like witchcraft and magic and everything is like everything is like we said, it's like you're either charging it up or you're letting it go. And the thing about seeing someone have what you want, all that's happening is just an object experience that has nothing to do with the other person and everything to do with you, right? And when you say, I
Mm-hmm.
want that, and then you create more distance by hating that person and hating what they have and fighting it, that's not going to be yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're in the bathhouse, and a girl has a beautiful figure and you've been working on yours and you say, that's some good shit. I like that. I like her. And you get close to her and you meld with her energy and she kind of gives you some of her vibe. You're going to be that much closer to your goal than you would be if you look at her and say, oh, how dare she? Like, why? What is she? Just make me so uncomfortable. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
in that moment, it's just an object of affection, that
Mm-hmm.
you can turn into like an object of attraction. Like, it's important. Yeah.
I've been like trying to practice that train of thought, especially like in spaces where it's really hard to. My new
Hmm.
thing, my new thing is not getting mad if a girl has sex with my ex. That's my new
Yeah.
thing.
You know
Because
what?
that's a hard one.
You're 1 for 1 right now.
1 for 1 right
One
now.
for one.
No, it's a hard one. I think that's one, another thing I'll say is I do think much like in the Roman bathhouses, all the men were a little gay. I think as a woman, you always have to be a little gay. You know
Yep.
what I
Yeah.
mean? And what I mean by that is like, if you see someone hot looking at your boyfriend, it's like, just be like, I would fuck her too. I don't blame him. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And that realizes a lot. And it's true, like I think that's a great feature. And sometimes, and since I unlocked that a little more, um, I think about this sort of, you know, the Roman bathhouse thing. I'm like, that's probably what made them so successful is that what like the men were able to see each other more clearly because there wasn't this like competition for women, they're always like, well,
Hmm.
we're little gays. I like him too, whatever, you know? So that's part of the bathhouse.
Women are intimidating. Like, really, like
Oh,
the
yeah,
energy that like
beautiful.
women have, like, just crazy. Like, my friend, like, Bear was just telling me about how, like a while ago, and it stuck in my head forever. Like, women are just so powerful. Like, every woman is a witch. And I think about that
Yeah.
all the time.
I think we're all so insanely powerful. And, someone made a good point where everyone's always complaining about the phone and the internet. And it's like, it's an incredibly powerful tool, but we don't talk about the
Hmm.
fact that if you can't wield a tool properly, then it fucks you over. And I think it's the same thing with women. We have so much power. We have so much perceptive power. We have so much connecting power. We have so much community power. But when you don't think about it that way, it ends up being a block and it ends up being frenetic and crazy. And then you have all this anxiety and fear and mania. It's
Hmm.
women are very, yeah, and I'd love to just
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Wanted to like
I know.
switch to just like talking about your internet background a little bit.
Okay.
Because I did see that you posted that you used to be I have it written down. You used to be kind of in activist communities, and also I saw like that you used to social network on Neopets, and I thought that was really
Oh,
cute.
yeah.
And I wanted to just ask about, what that looked like for you being young on the internet and kind of just a timeline of how you've garnered the following you have now, because I also think your community is really distinct and very sweet because I think it's really hard to find communities online
Mhm.
where there's not like these really negative aspects to it. And I did feel like because, I got on the Patreon this week, I was looking through the Discord and I was like, this
Welcome.
seems really sweet.
Yeah, I think, well, because I think a lot of people believe what I believe, which, speak like Patreon and everything. It's like something I share a lot is I'm just like, if you don't like me anymore, like that's okay. You know what I mean? Like I'm always like, it's not resonating anymore, it's like, then I did my job. You know what I mean? You got what you needed from me and now you're gonna go do something with it. And I think I'm always just reminding people it's just not that important if you like someone or not, like especially with like women's stuff, it's like I also think that there's this part of the parasocial quality of the internet where people have breakups with people and there's no ritual for that other than talking shit about them, and
Mhm.
every hater I've ever had, if I actually engage with them, they're usually like used to be a fan or didn't like one thing I said and now they're kind of heartbroken and they don't know what's going on. um, so I think that's what makes it sweet is just like I think I attract a lot of high agency people who if they stop resonating with something they're not going to waste their time like picking it apart. It's like on to the next one. Like it's a big world. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
come back, later. Um, but yeah, Neopets, like I'm like, wait, I'm gonna get my little Neopets.
Oh
Just
my God,
Oh,
stop. No, because
stop.
that and like Webkins were such like an interesting
That's so
experience. Same with
cute.
like Club Penguin. That was like first social
yeah.
media in my head.
Ooh, Club Penguin. I wonder if like the same way Neopets, like nobody goes on the site anymore, but they like do little drops for the fans like this. Like this was like a Christmas thing where they're like, we have
That's so
plushies. Yeah.
cute.
Club
Aw,
Penguin should do that. I wonder if they
they
do. Imagine these
should.
huge penguin plushies. People would freak out. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, Neopets. They're like, because I don't think I'm really an influencer in the sense that I don't do brand deals anymore. Like I only, and they're like the only people where I'm like, they send me, I'm like their influencer because I
Aw.
use
You get
That's a
the
good brand
Neopets
to,
PR.
yeah, be behind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Neopets sold me. Like I was on there, I don't know, since I was like really young, like 9, 8, 7. Like I was on there for a
Mhm.
really long time. But I used to like the first time posting images of myself online were on Neopets, and you weren't allowed to do that because they were trying to protect the kids. So you'd get banned if you did that.
Mhm.
I think I got banned a couple times. I had so many accounts. I was always going crazy. But I would go on Neopets. I would and it's funny because I look at what I would do on Neopets and it's like no different than what I would do now, which is like I would go into the role play chat rooms and like play like fairy magic school all the time when I was a kid.
Yes.
Like my eyes are purple and I have a black cat. You know what I
Aw.
mean? And then I'd also do that with my friends in real life. Like it was that's the thing. It's like it was internet, but I think that's an interesting component to think about was it wasn't like all there. Like I would role play as a fairy and then I'd go to my friends and we'd play fairies like in my bedroom too, you know?
Mhm.
So it was like a very like creative like think tank.
Yeah.
And
You like get
yeah,
ideas from that to implement like
yeah, it was such a creative fun space and sometimes you'd play games and have like a gallery. Like I had a lot of fun. Yeah, and I would chat and I would make graphics. Like I think that okay, that's the other thing too. Like Patreon is just like a guild basically. And like Neopets had guilds where
Mhm.
it was just a group of people would get together and you could customize the web page and there people had roles like a Discord.
Mhm.
And that's how I learned how to do like basic Photoshop. And so everything Neopets taught me is why I do everything I do now because it was a mixture of social media and Photoshop and like just kind of getting excited about that world, you know?
Aw.
Mhm.
Pets is so cute. I wish they were just more famous so that they could open like a
Like a
amusement park.
pop-up
Like
shop. Yeah.
yeah. Stop.
Like I feel like
Aw.
I wish they had more power.
Wait, so what did like the timeline look like for you, like garnering a following like after? So you said you were in like activism communities kind of as well?
Not really. I always hated them. I just felt like I had to be in them. Um, and I didn't hate them because I honestly agree with everything. It just I hated the kind of what it would bring out of people, you know? And so
Yeah.
what ended up so this is actually what happened. This is exactly what happened was I was on Instagram and I started making memes on an anonymous page on Instagram. And at the time, you know how you see now there's like always these like internet scenes that pop up where it's like you're like, why is
Mhm.
everyone posting like this? And you're like, oh, there's a whole part of Instagram like this. So I was in one of
Yeah.
those online and it was the memers, like it was like the 2015 to 2017, like kind of like memes. And it was so much fun, right? People all over, everyone was weird, like it was just a lot of unique, progressive, cool people. And then people started making money and getting followers. And then I watched everyone just eat each other, which really very early on exposed me to not necessarily what only happens in activism circles, but just like any circles. And activism
Mm.
circles were a bit more brutal because instead of being like, fuck you, I don't like you or something, it was like, you are, a stain on capitalist, like you're a
Hmm.
capitalist class traitor. And let me convince everybody that you're like, it was a whole
Yeah, like
other
you're a bad person.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it was a whole other level of hating that was so dishonest and so based on this language that was so punitive. And
Hmm.
I always had to manage that. And it was sad because it's like you believe in the same things, but you don't believe in how it's being used. And so a lot of it was like dealing with all that in the beginning, but it was never too bad because it's not like I was like, but it was just so informative because I think about the things that people say to me now, and it was like they were saying the same things to me back then. Like it was like, why are you making t-shirts? Why are you doing anything? So that was kind of hard. But that wasn't, I wouldn't say activist circles were really part of anything other than just like something in the air and ideology to deal with. But the meme making
Hmm.
really got me going. Like I would just like there's time like right now I'm kind of like that with Twitter. Like Twitter really brought back my posting bone, but like
Hmm.
for a while it was like memes was like everything. I'd make like 15 a day and it
That's
was
a
like
job.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I love it. Like it was like it felt like a chat room, like you'd make a meme and be like,
Yeah.
Aw.
what is someone gonna say? Okay, back to work. Like I'd make it in the bathroom at work and then be like, oh my
Mm.
God, like, it just gave me something to do. But yeah, the
Aw.
meme thing and then influencer culture really blew up. And I think what was so interesting about that was myself and some of the people I knew didn't go into internet stuff thinking that we could ever make money or ever do anything with it. It was
Mm.
something that only girls in bikinis had, honestly. Like it was like, unless you're
Yeah.
like, already wealthy and traveling the world, like nobody is going to give you stuff to sell. Um, and nobody's going to give you anything really. And then meme pages started just like being seen as kind of almost like contemporary art kind of adjacent movements. And then it was just a whole other world. And then kind of crazy. Like I was with a
Mm.
group of people who were like, "What? Like things are happening to me." And then only a few years later, we got this class that was on the internet shit because they knew they could make money, and it was a different energy, too. So it's been interesting to watch.
What you were saying about being in activism communities, or not communities, but just like,
Yeah.
like being in them and it being just like not helpful with the way that they respond to stuff or with the way it's like, okay, I'm just gonna hate on you now for this thing.
Mhm.
If like since the internet is obviously like insanely like powerful and like we were talking about pretty much this whole episode, kind of this new thing that is like changing the world in this way and becoming the main source of stuff. Like if you have any thoughts on what you think is helpful like with activism online, if like there is a way for it to be helpful or a way for them to intersect, because I feel like with how big and omnipresent the internet is, it feels like there has to be something, or like it has like, yeah. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on
Well,
it.
I believe this on a spiritual level and on kind of an activist, like helping people level. And it's something that I also just apply for everything as much as I can remember, where um, someone who said it really well was Sadhguru said recently. He was like, the brain cannot delete, it can only add. Also, the nature of the universe, you can't delete anything. You can only
Mm.
add things or transmute them. And I think the internet makes us feel like we can delete things because you can delete photos on your phone. But then I went into this hole and realized that that's not true either. When you delete something, it just gets put under other stuff or it gets
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
turned into an empty void like bit or something. But it never
Yeah.
fully deletes. There's nothing in this world that we can just get rid of, right? We can only add. So when you think about that as not just a spiritual thing, but a mental thing, and then also guiding a community thing, the problem with activism in the past 10 years or so was that it veered into this direction of degrowth and of trying to delete, right? Trying to make people mad about the past, trying to hurt people, trying to push other people down, right? And it works for a little bit, just as bullying works for a second, right? Bullying will shut someone up for a while, and then you know they're bound to turn that energy into something else. And I think that no matter what, a growth energy and an uplifting energy always works better than anything else, and it doesn't mean that you're
Mm.
dishonest. It doesn't mean that you're fake positive. It just means that you're using the tool that actually works. And
Mm.
what we saw with, people are saying now that all of the work that was done online is now being completely undone and thrown away with the new administration and the new ideology taking over. And it's like, why do you think that it is? It's because those people who are being pushed down and bullied, they just grew on their own silently, and then they came back
Mm.
and they just slapped it out of their hand.
Mm.
But were
Yeah.
they in the corner being like, okay, let's try and like let's use let's fight, let's jab back, you know what I mean? It was like a whole other. And I just think like I have this passion about doing things well. And I think that's why with activism communities, it was like, I agreed with everything. The method was just so bad.
Yeah.
And then you end up having all these people that end up with personal mental illnesses and debilitating anxiety because you're pumping them up with negativity and pain. And then it became this battle of like, who has the most empathy because they're so full of
Mm.
pain. And so we have all
Yeah.
these people who are paralyzed at their phones being like, I care so much. And it's like, yeah, okay, but do you want to move? Do you want to move? So that's how I
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
I feel like the threat of isolation too, which is often a thing for that, because it's like, we'll
Mhm.
cancel you. And I think that that's like such a terrifying thing for people because that's like the thing that people are scared of the most is being alone and having no friends. And I just like every time I see it, I just never think that it's helpful. Obviously, there's like we should teach people things, Like
Yeah.
obviously, like we can all learn from each other and feel like I definitely get what you're saying because I just feel like all of it kind of is this like threat of, well, we'll make you alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have like, God, it's like I feel like something that a lot of people don't know about me, but I had a friend who used to always call me cancel auntie because I've helped so many influencers in private get over cancels or the fear of it. And
Mhm.
it's
That's
just
so
so
funny.
crazy. Yeah. And it doesn't happen anymore. You know what I mean? Like it was so prevalent for a while. And yeah, like you said, it's like this weird, I mean, and it's interesting too because it has all the same marks of a cult, right? It's like isolate you from people who care, like who actually care about you, even if it's your family, and always kind of dangle this like stake that's like keeping progressive, keep being better, you know?
Mm.
I had this tweet that I think is kind of harsh, but I'm gonna read it. This is mean, but this is how I feel. I said, woke people be like, I did everything you told me to do with as much victimizing language as possible and made all my shortcomings clear. Can I be happy now? Amorphous ideological master. And the crowd says, no. We move the post again. Get another diagnosis. That's,
That's
that's
funny.
how it
Yeah.
started to feel. Yeah, that's how it started to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing the right thing. Nope, you're not doing the right thing, actually. And it just didn't feel real anymore. And it took people's spirit away. You know, even some of the best artists, like, you know, I was thinking about like Kendrick Lamar was like hating on cancel culture throughout his album. And it's like, why does he have to deal with it? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's done so much for people. Like why does he have to now deal with cancel culture and stop his art that
Mhm.
genuinely gave people spiritual empowerment?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
it's interesting. But yeah, I'm very bullish on autonomy and upliftment and spirit and like true true empowerment, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really nice thing to advocate for because I feel like we have to at this point because it's so negative for people the way that the internet can be really reactionary. I think there has to be something, some kind of overturning, some kind of new solution to this because it's just not helping. Shifting a little bit back to your personal like journey with the internet. I'm curious because you have like a published book as well. I'm curious if that
Mhm.
was like within just your journey of becoming a creator, garnering a following. Um,
Mm.
if
Gardening.
gardening a
You're like
following.
harvesting them.
Really curious about this because I'm also a writer,
Mm,
but um
mm,
like if having a following in some ways like obviously that's like helpful because it's like okay, we can market it to these people,
mm,
but then it's harder for like places to take you seriously as a writer, I think. So I'm
mhm.
curious about
Okay.
that.
You know, I have so many opinions on this because I feel so vindicated. But so when I came out with my book, okay, so this is very related. I was looking at different publishers. I went through so many things, right? I was like, I had actually contacted this big publisher, but they wanted me to do like a gift book, right? So this is like just a wonderful painting of the scene, right? It's like a big publisher will want to give you a floral cover and pump you out and whatever. And then if you do self-publishing, it's like the boxes are in your bedroom. That's what I kept seeing. I was like, I don't want the boxes in my bedroom. And but self-publishing is still so lucrative. And then so I was looking at indie publishers and I emailed this one that I actually had some mutual friends with, and I emailed them and they didn't get back to me for a week, and they finally did. And it turns out that when he first got my email and didn't do any research on me, he just saw like an influencer girl and he was like, oh, another influencer wants a book, because my publisher is very serious about like literature, you know, like he'll publish someone who
Mm,
has like, no audience at all if he truly believes that they're a good voice. Like he's not trying to just make money, you know what I mean? It's like he really cares about literature. And then it wasn't until one of his close friends was like, oh, no, 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 like she's been in the game for a long time, like she's just not a random Instagram girl, like she's been making art and being around LA for so long. Then he looked deeper in my stuff and then we got the book deal. But even that process to me kind of tells you, right, like answers
yeah.
that question a bit. And I remember just being so confident. Well, one thing, I was confident just in my audience. Like I saw it as like just like anything else, like people are going to like it, people are going to buy it. But because my publisher was so literature oriented and had such close ties to the poetry scene in LA, I got to access this other market of people who like took literature seriously. Like I got to basically like kind of go into the literature scene more. And that was
Mm,
really helpful. But it was like this funny thing where now what's going on, like this was like the book came out like 2 years ago, and it felt like I was taking a risk. I was like, yeah, people are going to think I'm just some influencer, some Tumblr poet, whatever. That's fine. Like, it's fine. And it was so clear to me that if people read my book without seeing my Instagram, they loved it and they took it in fully. You know, old men, like
Mm-hmm.
I would do stuff in cafes or like, and somebody would wander in and it would be some, you know, older person who apparently isn't my market demographic, you know, never seen Tumblr in their life, not a girl, and would just love it. And I realized that the barrier is really just what people's opinion of what an influencer is, and that people haven't really rounded out to the fact that like everyone online is technically in some capacity going to be just an internet personality now. Like that's just part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dealt with that and it was back and forth. Another thing I feel is like I like being contemporary, I like being current, and like the state of literature right now is this kind of like cross posting with like influencers, so I like being part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, some people do judge you, and you even see it like on like Goodreads reviews and stuff. It's like people love to point out like they're like, stop giving influencers books, and it's like I've been writing for a very long time. um, but other than that, something that made me feel really vindicated is now the state of publishing, and my publisher's involved with a lot of different publishers right now and like trying to acquire like, you know, like boomer businesses and stuff. And the state of publishing right now is that everyone kind of has to have some kind of internet pull.
Mm-hmm.
And the format has shifted where now people who get attention from their writing, it's like you can self-publish. You can have no publisher at all, but if you have an audience, like that book can become prolific. And we see it a lot on Twitter,
Yeah.
honestly. These weird like writers like who really influence people. And then you're like, whoa, their book was self-published, like, and they're selling it through Amazon. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, affected the ideology of like thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. Like it's really shifted. And so I kind of felt vindicated in the way where like I'm like, now people want the information from me. How did you advertise your book on TikTok? Like how do you know? It's like it's
Mm-hmm.
just switched and it's the new market. And, you know, same way people used to hate on influencers and now it's like there's an entire insane money flow and like job flow out there. And now everyone kind of has to learn social media and influencer tools. You know, it's like it's really
Yeah.
just kind of spun the other way, you know, where
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it's actually a handicap to be so attached to the old way and be like, I need to be seen as this like educated, like literature, like genius, like hermit. It's like it just sure, like for yourself, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting. But I love that topic because I'm like, it's shifting. And I love that anyone
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
make a book now, you know. I love that anyone can make a book, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, I think.
No,
No, I think like
definitely.
the marketing tactic that everyone kind of has to be a part of now is really interesting because it's like not just writing a book and then like getting someone to help you do the rest anymore. It's like you're kind of with it for the whole process. And I that is like interesting. And there's also part of it that I think is really scary.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, it's like it's the same thing with kind of the future of, you know, intellect and literacy kind of being something that you have to go out of your way to make sure you have. Like I think it's the same
Hmm.
thing with every industry now. It's like so much is on the individual, which is honestly both a great responsibility and a great power, you know? And it's like
Mm.
you have access to everyone. There's no middleman anymore, but also like you're the middleman and like you got to get, you know, kind of like you got to now you're a marketer, now you're a you know like a visionary for the project like you know like
Yeah.
self-promoting it's like it's a whole thing but yeah there is something interesting about it like my
Mm.
way if I had to sort of I think the way to do it is to always publicly note take because that's a way to post and kind of get people on board with what you've been thinking about and get peer review at the same time. And then when you come
Mm.
out with something that's at the end of that, it's like you've already done all the marketing without trying, you know? And I think
Mm.
that's
Hmm.
like if you're writing a book right now, it's like and you're communing with some kind of character and like it's like just start like dressing like that character. Like, you know what I mean? Like just give your internet performance to your project and people will
Mm.
catch on. And then I think that's the way to do it. But it is, yeah. Like when I think about it in totality, I'm like, it's a lot of work, you know, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
doing
No,
that.
it
But
makes sense why people would get burned out from it very easily or just like creatively burned out because it is just doing everything now on one person.
Totally. And I'll say one more thing too about that is the structure that we grew up with is like a painter who is really famous, like let's say a famous painter, I'm thinking like Barbara Kruger or something. She also would teach at UCLA, right? A major
Mm.
writer would like, have their novels come out, but they would also have a professor job. And I think what we're seeing
Mhm.
now is people get to do that, but on like Patreon and Substack, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
like this podcast, it's like this would count if before the internet, this would have been on a stage, a panel discussion. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like at an institution. And now it's like, well, the institution can happen in your house. And
And
like,
it's youtube.com.
yeah. And it's YouTube and it's the payment from the ads, it's Patreon and having everyone just give you like $2 a month to just hear your lecture. You know what I mean? It's like it's the same
Mhm.
thing, but just so in the hands of the public. And I always try to remind myself and other people, it's like not that different. Like it's not as daunting as it feels. It's just a different format, and a different,
Mm,
you don't have to get your foot in the institution. You just have to like build your own, you know,
yeah.
crazy.
Mm. No, I
It's
think
one.
what you said about like it kind of being like a barricade to have a following, like you kind of
Mhm.
need that to publish a book. Like I feel like it's an interesting thing that you brought up because I have been thinking about this for years when someone said to me, like I like was on like some random like New York trip and like my friend's brother was like, if you want to ever publish a book, you're gonna have to get on Substack and you're gonna have to be an influencer. And I feel
Yeah.
like I like internalized that and genuinely has been part of like my motivation like to just
Mm.
but also if you boil it down like I've always kind of thought that way about like social media where I'm like if you like find people and people care about you like you can do anything and I think that's like an insane power to have.
Mhm. And I will say too, I think there's a ceiling for both. Like I think that the key, and I'll say this is a fact. This is a fact. Both have a ceiling, right? You can
Mm,
rack up
Mhm.
a ton of followers on TikTok and then they fall off and you just have a number there. I see it all the time, 1 million and like 4,000
yeah.
views. You can rack up the general public, but they're not connected because people don't feel connection from numbers. You know what I mean? Like at
Yeah.
first, like, wow, 1 million followers, maybe they have something to say, but true connection is on a local level. Like, aren't you going to click on an article about something that happened in like a writer scene in your world more than you would about like some random celebrity? Like, there is so much value to locality. And I think that the key for everything in the future is like just having your hand in both. It's like, okay, you can reach
Mm,
someone in China, in Italy, in Russia, and like they can just like you because they like your hair and your style. Awesome. Maybe they'll, engage. But then there's also this like locality. It's like you still have to engage with like your local scenes and like and work together on this like seemingly lower level, you know what I mean? But a
mm,
lot happens here.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So much happens here.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
and
lot.
word of mouth is also just still a thing obviously. Like
100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
The most influential stuff still rose in a way that was completely outside of the, seemingly like influencery, like shiny,
Mm,
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I
Yeah.
feel like you're just hurting yourself if you're like depriving yourself of one or the other because they're both
Mhm.
just really beneficial and really great ways to find community and to have that space.
Yeah,
mm.
absolutely. And just participation. I had a friend say it really well where it was like, I just want to participate. Like that's what my publisher said.
Yeah.
Aw.
Like,
Aw.
I'm just happy to participate. He's like, that's why I'm in publishing. He's like, I like to participate. And that's like my mantra now, It's like,
Aw.
Mm.
it's just great to be there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I
Yeah,
I did just
thank
want to
you.
say like it was like lovely to read your book because related so much like especially about the heartbreak and like the one story that was about tripping shrooms. I was like, wow, this I loved that part because it just felt like you described it really well, but I don't know. I also just like love seeing people write about heartbreak because I feel like it's one
Mhm.
like of the most universal experiences and also, like, for me, I feel like it was like the thing that made me really spiritual. Like, I like
Yeah.
dove deep into that after being like completely like heartbroken by my first love. And
Same.
like, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah,
just,
no,
that's
it,
on
same.
purpose. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Okay, that's
great.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's kind of big
No,
because that's exactly the structure of the book. It's like your first heartbreak, you need to use all the spiritual tools in the world to like heal.
yeah.
And it
No, it
gets
No,
feels like the starting off point for like everything in this way.
mm.
Like everything branches off of it, which is yeah, what I really liked about your like that your book did that too, because that's just like life I feel like for
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
many people.
No, I love that that was your experience because that was totally
Yeah.
like that's my theory. That's literally like if there was one of the thesis of the book is like the first heartbreak is when you kind of start getting in like even more esoteric. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's crazy. I
No,
Yeah.
love that.
I like look at that time period for me a lot, and
Mm,
because it was like so it was like one of the most insane things I've ever experienced, because I literally what came out of me doing that and like being
mm,
creative because of how like horrible I felt. Like I literally like drafted a book. I was like writing all the time. Like it was like insane. And like I
um,
often then too, and I was gonna ask about this as well. Like I look back and I'm like, oh, I was like so spiritual and so connected with myself.
mhm,
And I think that then like healing in a way, you
mm,
start to not feel like I don't know, at least my experience was I almost feel like less connected than I did when I was like deeply heartbroken. And I
mhm.
wonder if that's like something that you've experienced at all, or if you've like at all struggled with like connection with spirituality. Because I feel like it's something I've looked back on, and maybe it's just because of comparison that I'm like,
Mhm.
why was I like feeling so like good and connected in one then, and now
Yeah.
I feel more distanced from that thing.
Okay, so I think this is a fact to me. Like this is one of my facts. Is like
I love your facts.
I know.
This is my
like
fact.
sensitivity, like there's this thing where I'm like, okay, any deep feeling is just sensitivity, whether it's good or bad, whether you're super,
Mm,
super euphoric, you took Molly and all of a sudden you're getting downloads, like that's sensitivity as much as being so depletingly heartbroken is sensitivity. You know what I mean? Sensitivity makes you
mm,
more perceptive. It makes you more like eager. It's like it makes your ups and downs a little more extreme. But like the benefit of that is this greater sensitivity, and sensitivity is the entry point to everything spiritual. Like this really got hammered in for me when I was at this school, Arthur Findlay College, which I recommend to everybody. And it's this crazy school in the UK where you like go into a deep trance and you try to talk to the dead and all this stuff. And in the first meditation, I remember feeling the exact feeling of anxiety in my whole chest, right? And in the very first meditation we did, I thought in my head, I'm like, oh, meditation is about being relaxed and having anxiety is a bad thing. And so we went to the meditation, we came out of it, and she was like, how was that for everyone? And I was like, well, I had so much like physical anxiety. I think I'm nervous to be here. And I just spent the whole time getting rid of it. And she was so stern with me. And she was like, no, she was like, that is the sensation you get before you go deep. Like, that is the sign that your nervous system is sensitive enough to switch levels. And
Mhm.
mm,
the whole week, this anxiety feeling was a sign that I was at a greater state of depth that I could go deeper. And it was a
Mhm.
fact. You know what I mean? Anytime I went to the
yeah.
meditation, if I felt nothing, I wasn't, I was a bit too human. I was a bit too, I wasn't in that space. And it was so enlightening to me because I was like, what about all the time? What about outside of this school when I have, anxiety or fear? It's like, how do I tell myself, okay, it's sensitivity and then be like, okay, what do I do with it now? You know what I mean?
Mm,
Mhm.
That's how I feel about heartbreak is like the narrative says, oh, you're a loser, you got broken up with, like blah, blah, blah. But then, when you let yourself just like be in it and you forget that story for a second, it's just like it's art, it's creativity, it's, saying yes to a crazy trip or like some, and like your life just gets so potent and so psychedelic,
mm,
Yeah.
and it really is just sensitivity because all that stuff is there all the time. It's just like waiting for you to be a little bit more like honestly like weird to like see it,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like ugh, I love that. I just love
Aw.
it.
No, I think that about that a lot with anxiety,
Mhm.
um, and trying to like remind myself that it can be like a good thing, and it might just be like signifying like I don't know what's gonna happen next, and that's when something cool can happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's like an electrifying. That's always what I'm doing now is I'm always like, okay, stop telling stories, like just focus on the energy. Like that was coming up a lot on Patreon about mania because that's something that I've always sort of reckoned with and always tried to make sure it doesn't get to that point, right? That's like scary. And I'm just like,
Mm,
it really is the thing that fucks you up is the stories you tell, right? But the manic energy
Mhm.
itself can go anywhere. It can make you run more
yeah.
than you've ever ran. It can make you write more than you've ever written. It can make you pull things from the sky that you didn't even know you could think.
Yeah.
But if you tell yourself, "Oh, like, I'm so mad, I need to get out of here. I need to break up with my boyfriend. I need to change everything. I need to change my job," then it's over. You know what I mean? It's like focus on the energy and it'll give you it's purely fuel. That's what I think. I think a lot of things we feel is fuel and then we
Mm,
give it a place to go and sometimes we give it to the wrong place, right? Because someone's telling us how we're supposed to feel, you know?
mm.
So that's my obsession. I'm obsessed with
I love it. Thanks for sharing.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that feeling of pulling from somewhere higher, because I feel like that
Mhm.
almost feels like it's a weird type of drug. And whenever I was experiencing that, like now that I like don't experience it as frequently, I often look back and I'm like, oh, I need to be there. And
Yeah.
I feel like the same thing kind of needs to happen in reverse, if that makes sense. Accepting like, oh yes, I can be in this like heartbreak state and like
Yeah.
still feel energized. And I think like right now what I'm trying to do is like grapple with like not being in that state and
Mhm.
like still being able to like let things like just like chill and like let things come to me and like let feelings come to me that like aren't that because it was like something I knew for so long, you know?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Spiritual engineering, right? Maybe
Mhm.
engineering. Yeah, I believe that we really just have to like everyone you see the people using the word alchemist again. I feel like
Mm,
it's like you really have to be in there and be like, I can like engineer my habitat. You know what I mean? Like if I need to take this
Mhm.
down, I can take it down. If I need to take it up, you know, I think that's the
mm,
future for sure. For sure.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
It was so
thank you so
fun. I
much.
love this conversation.
I love
It
when you
was
like
really nice
you
talking
don't
to
even
you.
know like when it goes and you like don't even know what happened. That's my favorite feeling.
Yeah.
So we kind of have all of our guests repeat this thing where we ask them to request Josh Ovalle. It's like our bit of the podcast. If we could just send this thing in chat for you to
Yeah.
say.
Feels
Yeah, I mean
right.
it's like I'm like, I don't know how to say your name, so you better do more podcasts.
Yeah.
I, sighswoon, hereby request Josh Ovalle for collaboration with the Internet is Dead podcast. Please, Josh, be a guest on the podcast. We miss you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. That was very intense. Very good
Yes, that
eye
was good.
contact
Yeah.
skills.
I know.
Yes.
I was
Thank
I
you
was
so
on a podcast
much.
with Alan. It was so fun. So I'll
Aw.